Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader, a podcast dedicated to discussing women's unique challenges in the tech industry. I'm your host, Limor Bergman-Gross, and I'm excited to share another episode, part of Season 3, Negotiate Like a Woman. And today, I'm excited to introduce my guest, Barbara Spitzer. Barbara is the founder and CEO of Two Rivers Partners, and she has an impressive 35-year career as a trusted advisor to boards and CEOs. She specializes in technology-led transformations and has a wealth of experience in driving organizational success. And today, Barbara is going to share her invaluable insights on authentic leadership and effective negotiation strategies. You'll learn how to advocate for yourself with confidence, build strong professional relationships, and harness the power of self-awareness to succeed in the tech industry. So stay tuned for an engaging and informative discussion that I'm sure will empower you to lead with authenticity and negotiate like a pro. Let's dive in. Hi, Barbara. Welcome. Thank you so much for
Hi,
being here today.
hi, Limor. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely my pleasure. And we'll start maybe talking a little bit about your experience and perspective on women in tech. And if you're willing to start by kind of sharing your challenges, the biggest challenges you faced as a woman in the very, very male-dominated tech field.
Absolutely, yeah. I've just transitioned from a 35-year full-time career in tech consulting firms, really driving a lot of technology-led transformations. I spent some time in the dot-coms during the dot-com boom. I'm not a Silicon Valley tech person. I'm East Coast here in the US. So it's a little bit different, but I think the themes are the same. So, you know, I started my career at a time when, women were not allowed to wear pants. We had to wear pantyhose. I got hit on by a senior partner working over the weekend once, and it's just a really different world. And that wasn't just about tech, right? That was the way it was. Unfortunately, what I've observed in my own experience over those 35 years and now with what I'm doing now, not a lot has changed in the world of tech. Women don't get the level of investment. They're not represented at the senior positions. And there's a lot of mansplaining that goes on. There's a lot of labels that get tied. There's a lot of bias, etc. So for me, I really became a partner right around 2000, 2001. So I spent a good bit of my career in senior positions in one particular tech firm. I was the only woman on the leadership team for about 4 years until we finally promoted another woman and hired two. And by the time I left, only one of them was left. That was, I was the only for a long time. It was incredibly male dominated. The culture was very misogynistic in a lot of ways. And I found myself at first really trying to fit in, they would do things like literally go to strip clubs when we'd be off on a business trip, or, heavy drinking, sort of a climate. And, it wasn't the healthiest time for me. Something happened, which I can talk about in a minute, but I sort of I reframed, if you will, my desire to fit in with my desire to be authentic to myself. And I'd say the end of my tenure there was a lot better than the beginning of my tenure once I made that pivot. But it's the typical things, right? It's just being labeled, and excluded and frankly, not really respected when you're sitting at the table. That's just been a a common theme throughout my journey.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, to some, I can definitely relate based on my own experience. I didn't have the experience of strip clubs or anything like that, but thankfully, but definitely, you know, biases and all that, and the fitting in thing that you mentioned. Um, what what advice would you give to a woman that maybe is in an environment that is very muscular and she wants to fit in? What should we do?
Hmm. Well, listen, I realized that I'm a pretty polarizing character. I have a huge following of people I've worked with over the years, and so many best friends, male and female, from my 35-year working in these large firms. And then I have people who I know I wasn't popular with. You know, they didn't like my style. I've been called sharp elbowed. You know, I've had a couple situations where I felt like some of the guys were trying to not take me down, because that sounds way too dramatic, but maybe undermine me and my leadership. And I just sort of realized a long time ago that I don't have to be like a man. I mean, as a woman, you have to be a good communicator. As a person, you have to be a good communicator. It's not race, gender specific. Now, but women and people who are ethnically, racially diverse, just people with disabilities, LGBTQ, they are held to a different standard when it comes to being a good communicator and relationship builder. You you can't get away acting like one of the boys, because you're not. But I always found that there is a sort of a secret language, you know, with the guys that a lot of women aren't in on, and so you can't really fight that, right? So just, you know, learning how to be an effective negotiator, an effective relationship builder, and a really good communicator is super important. And I think sharpening those skills are probably the most important thing to do. But I think not being your authentic self and trying to fit in with the guys is not it is not a winning strategy. I talk a lot about corporate survivalist skills. And so, you know, I've got a sort of a bunch of thoughts around, you know, how do you really strengthen and hone those skills, and some stories around some, you know, some situations that really called on me uh to sort of dig deep in myself and pull out those skills and apply them.
Absolutely. Is there anything specific you would like to share?
Yeah. I have two stories. One, this one firm that I was at, where it was quite male dominated, I was the only for a long time. Uh, we created a new level of vice president, senior vice president. And when promotion time came, two of the guys got promoted and I did not. And I was very upset. And what I did was, I took a deep breath. I reached out to some mentors of mine, and they said, look, gather the facts. You know, go get your sales numbers, get their sales numbers. You know, identify what you've done to lead and grow the practice, and what did they do. So I gathered the data, and I didn't go to my boss. I went to his boss, the global CEO. And I said, look, you know, here's the situation. I didn't get promoted. Here's what I've done, blah, blah, blah. I went through all the details, and he apologized on the spot. He said, I'm very sorry. I made a mistake. And how do we fix it? You know, so I got promoted. He helped me. He asked me to help him craft a very careful communication about why I wasn't on the original list. And, you know, and like, that's what pivoted that experience for me, where I was trying to feel. And I said, look, you know, here's the situation. I didn't get promoted. Here's what I've done, blah, blah, blah. I went through all the details, and he apologized on the spot. He said, I'm very sorry. I made a mistake. And how do we fix it? You know, so I got promoted. He helped me. He asked me to help him craft a very careful communication about why I wasn't on the original list. And, you know, and like, that's what pivoted that experience for me, where I was trying to fit in, be one of the guys. I stood up for myself. I took a fact-based, non-emotional approach to advocating for myself, and I got the promotion that I deserved. And so, you know, to me, that's not my normal tendency. My normal tendency is to be emotional and angry and, go with the full force of my passion, to fight for myself. And I didn't do it that time. And so I really took a turn in my career in terms of how I want to show up as a female leader. So that's one positive story. Another one, this was a technology transformation program. We were implementing an HR cloud system. And I was the lead salesperson on the deal. It was a multi-million-dollar deal, a 75 to $100 million. Okay. And I was leading the engagement. I had all the client relationships. I had gone in, I really turned around the relationship with the client. They were ready to, kind of say sorry.
Mm-hmm.
We got the RFP, we responded. And I'm a driver, I'm pretty assertive, and I very client focused, and I know how to build the relationships. And two of my peers did not really respect that I had sort of built those relationships and I had those relationships. And, I think they thought that I was cutting them out, and I wasn't at all. But I did have a leadership role. I was the lead salesperson. Well, they kind of took me down a little bit with the account executive and the practice leader, and had a side meeting, made complaints about me. And then so the practice leader and the account exec had calls with them without me, and I knew it was going on. And, basically they also turned the client a little bit against me. Not against me, it's the wrong word, but, the practice leader, long story short, was a woman who never really supported me along the way, and I knew it. So anyway, I called the both of them, and I said, look, you've excluded me, you scapegoated me, and you haven't asked me for, my side and my view on the story. And we had a long conversation, and I ended up getting an apology from both of them. They said, I'm very sorry. I ended up rolling off the project anyway, because we were moving into implementation. I was more of a salesperson, and it was a natural, but the way that it was done was really painful, really hurtful. There's probably a ton of lessons for me to learn around this is when I learned I need to treat my peers like I treat my clients. That was a big learning for me. I treat my clients so well. I probably didn't treat my peers quite as well. So I have, ownership in that. But the story was, in terms of corporate survival, the skills, make sure you're treating your peers as well as you're treating other important stakeholders. But when you know that you have been mistreated, you've got to speak out for yourself and say, listen, this is what you did, and here's how it made me feel. And in this case, I said, here's what I did and what I could have done better. I got apologies, and I felt so much better as a result of it. So those are two stories that I really hold dear in my heart, where I learned something really important, and I made a big pivot in how I show up as a woman, as a female leader in tech. So those
Absolutely. Those are incredible stories. And I think you mentioned something about not being too emotional, using data, and also confronting the situation, right? Not trying to avoid the conflict. That's kind of another thing that I got from you. And I agree with that. I think that responding with emotions is never a good thing. I mean, when you're angry, frustrated, it's not good to bring that into the conversation, rather than trying to be a little bit more assertive, but kind of leaning on facts, data, observations, impacts, and so forth, rather than you were, stuff like that. And I think those one of the, I think part of the strength of being a woman, that we bring a lot of emotional intelligence to the room. Mm-hmm. And we don't need to necessarily negotiate like men do. And that's why I kind of wanted to have the theme of this season, negotiate like a woman. And I would love to hear from you. So you already shared a story about how you did not get the promotion and how it worked for you. What other tips do you have for women that are negotiating? It could be for salary or for promotion or anything else, to be honest.
Yeah. We all know, we leave money on the table, right? I mean, I read a recent study where women in STEM make $15,000 less a year or more than men, right? We leave money on the table. And we all know the studies, women won't apply for a job unless they meet all of the criteria. Men will say, oh, I got 3 of them, I'm definitely qualified. And, uh, there was a really interesting qualitative study that was done about juniors and seniors, women studying STEM jobs around. They asked the women to write a letter to the future student. What advice would they give? And they said, well, we all struggle. Okay. We need to be better able to accept failure. We need to tap the community, bring collaboration to the table, know when to ask for help, and believe in our self-efficacy. And I think that all of those things really struck me. I love the study because it was from the voice of students who are embarking upon this career. Well, when we go to the negotiating table and we don't have self-confidence, self-efficacy, we're afraid of failure. We bring our emotionalism into that discussion. Maybe we don't come in, with all the facts. And more importantly, we don't command the leadership role that we have. Even if we aren't the lead negotiator, we're at the table for a reason, right? Whether we're, the content person or the salesperson, whatever your role may be, you're at the table because you belong at the table. So I think first and foremost in negotiations, knowing that you belong, even if you don't feel it, And so I believe in reframing. And so if you're going into a salary negotiation or a promotion negotiation or contractual negotiation, reframe that you belong at the table. You earned that and you have the capabilities and skills. And if you don't believe it, trust me, the guys don't believe it either. Anymore, they're no more doubtful than you are.
That's
about
true.
what's going to, right? So, and I also, there's another thing I say. I took a personality test for a job interview one time, and they asked me, do you get nervous before presentations? Do you get nervous before client meetings? Do you get nervous when you're going into a complex negotiation? And I said, no, because it was for recruitment. I don't want them to think that I'm not confident. Well, the results came back and they said, you're not really self-aware. You have an inflated view of yourself. And I said, what? So they said, well, these questions. I said, oh, no, I didn't answer truthfully. I said, I get terrified before every presentation. I'm terrified before a complex negotiation. So everybody is. And if you're not nervous, then you're not prepared. You're going to go in and wing it, and you may fail, you may succeed. So recognizing that anxiety and nervousness is normal, and it is the fuel. Like, I have anxiety and it's my superpower, and it is the fuel to ensure that you are fully prepared. So knowing you're going in position, like if you're going to go and negotiate a salary, do some market research, and it's a lot available these days, try to understand, the gap in terms of you as a woman versus men, or what have you done to take the next level job description above you and identify the 5 or 6 things that you're already doing above that and why you deserve it. So it's about being prepared. So there is no magic bullet to be a better negotiator as a female. To me, it's all how you show up and prepare and be prepared.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Definitely preparation and knowing your worth is very, very important.
Yeah.
I think it's also about the attitude. Coming with a positive attitude and not for a combat. I think for me at least, I'm always trying to be positive. As much as I can. Sometimes the situations are not easy, but trying as much as possible to be positive and calm as much as I can.
Yeah. I've always been on the selling side of the contract negotiation table, never the client side. And there's nothing worse than sitting across the table from a combative client negotiating with you for the best price, the best terms. It's horrible. It feels awful, right? I've also sat at tables with a very collaborative and friendly client, and, so much better, right? So you're right about that. I could not agree more. And yeah, that confidence is key. Um, but uh, it's kind of also knowing, what your end game is. What are you willing to leave on the table, and what are your non-negotiables? Because if you can be really clear about what you're going to give back, then you're going to get those things that you really want. Don't go in wanting everything because it's not realistic. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, non-negotiables, and they also a lot of times there are many alternatives for the
There are.
negotiation. There's not like one
Yeah,
like
right.
salary number or like the contract, right?
Correct.
With the client. There are a lot of different factors, a lot of terms, and you have to kind of consider
Right.
them. And how are you willing to be flexible?
That's right. Right. But if there's something you're not willing to let go of, then just know it. And then you know when to walk away. You know, a job, interviewing for a job is one thing, right? You can walk away, but a salary negotiation is another thing. Like if you don't get what you want, then you got to figure out, well, when can I get what I want? What do I have to do to get what I want? Can we agree on a mid-year increase if I accomplish these things? So you got to go for alternatives for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. I was always surprised, that when I asked for money, and I usually gave a higher number than I wanted,
Yeah,
and it works.
it
It
does.
works a lot of the times because then they appreciate you more. Say, oh,
That's
she
right.
wants that. Not always they can give me what I want, but I put myself at a higher position.
Yeah. And also, saying I want is the wrong way to go about it. Saying I need is the right way to go about it. And then being able to articulate your values succinctly and why needing that level of salary or that promotion is warranted based upon your proven worth. And yeah, so that again, that's the preparation that you need to do. But yeah, go in with a higher number for sure. And then what are you willing to settle for? But then they know what kind of, how you see yourself and your value in the marketplace.
Definitely.
Yep.
And I want to kind of diverge into being your authentic self. And it's kind of related to negotiation, right? Because you want to negotiate as your own authentic self and not as someone else.
Yeah.
But, and you said earlier about, when you work with the all men kind of group and you try to be like them, and eventually you learned that you actually need to be like you. So can you share a little bit about this, and what are your tips for women in a very male dominant field?
Yeah. Oh boy. Um, it's so funny. You said something in the last bit that we just discussed that I wanted to hit on as a way to answer your question.
Mm-hmm.
I left one of the large firms and started my own business in 2020. Oh, I don't know, 15, and did that for several years. And then I got a call from a very large firm to come back and run a practice for them. And I was like, oh, it's too toxic for me. I know it's not going to be good. But the opportunity to have another 5 years of wealth creation and also the wonderful role that was being offered to me, I decided to go do it. And I went in a little bit with the wrong headset. Back to if you go into a negotiation aggressive and combative, I went in, this is going to be toxic. This isn't going to be good for me. And so what happened? It was a struggle. I had taken a job that another guy wanted, and he was hard on me, and rather than stepping up into strong leadership and confidence, I think I was a little bit combative with him. It's looking in hindsight, right? So it is how you show up. So, is my authentic self a combative person? Maybe, but I think that is actually, so we all have two sides of our personality. We've got the light side, which is how we are when we're self-regulating, when things are good and we're regulating ourselves. That is our true self. But the other side of our true self is when we forget to regulate because we're in a crisis, we're stressed, right? I went in with my dark side. I wasn't regulating, and I was more combative than I should have been. And I had some recovery work to do, and it turned out fine. But I was like, why didn't I go in regulating, my tendency, my personality tendencies? So your authentic self is both the great you and the dark side of you. That is authentic. So I think being self-aware, of when you're not regulating is really, really work that is worth doing. Mindfulness training, coaching, mentoring are all great tools to be mindful of. Oh my God, when am I slipping into that Barbara that is, not my favorite, but it's me, right? So I think, learning to admit when you're wrong and to apologize and make amends. Like with this particular person, we ended up being close colleagues. We figured out how to work together and, find mutually beneficial a symbiotic relationship, etc. And so, but that's maturity and learning. So if I can speak to some women early in their careers with me, these would be the kinds of things that I would want them to know. I just wrapped up a guest lecturing role at Columbia University, my alma mater, and I had the best students in the world, and they wrote me notes like, "Oh, we love your personality. You're so authentic. You didn't sugarcoat what consulting's about. Billable hours in sales." And, some people, you wave me off from it because that's not what I want. Some people are like, "Oh, I love that. I'm going to be so motivated by it." So it's like, tell the truth, be authentic, be real, but regulate that part of you that slips up and forgets,
Yeah.
how you want to show up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can relate to that. I had been on my dark side, quite a bit. And usually it happened when people were ticking off all the things that annoyed me, right? And I was trying to work on that. I was trying to work on that with a coach,
Mm-hmm.
and as you said, self-regulate, trying to really be more in control rather than be led into those situations and behaviors that I didn't want to get into. So definitely I'm with you on that. And I also had similar situation about being promoted and someone else wanted my role. And it was not easy, but what helped me was to understand that it's them and not me.
Yeah.
And I try to be the best I could, the best manager I could to this person, and try as much as possible to support them and not get even or anything like that. Eventually, it didn't work out and that person left. But it was not about me, it was about them, about that person not being okay with that
Yeah.
situation and not accepting it. So, not always you can amend things.
You're talking about compassion, and since I've left my, big career helping implement technology, transform through technology in large firms, I'm now advising nonprofits, small businesses, and I'm on 3 nonprofit boards. And it's awakened a side of me. I've always been a compassionate, generous person, but I have so much more bandwidth to truly be compassionate. And I see now that leaders who have compassion, and women are better at that,
Definitely.
not only for others, but for ourselves. Like men will do what we've been talking about, fail to self-regulate, show up in a way that maybe we didn't want to show up, and they'll like brush it off and they'll move on. Women will tend to beat themselves up. Oh, I can't believe I did that. Oh, they ruminate, they live it over and over and over again. And then that becomes paralyzing.
Yeah.
So I think, compassion for yourself and compassion for others is something that is also really worth cultivating in yourself. That doesn't mean being soft either, right? It's because it sounds like you weathered through that and you were firm, and the person decided to move on, which maybe was for the better.
Yeah, I think it didn't look like that at the beginning, but yes, as you said, I mean, know your limits and what you're willing to do. So eventually, I knew what I was willing and what I was not willing to live with. And things that I didn't agree, I just didn't agree. And I
Hmm.
knew that yes, the implications might be that this person will leave, and I actually didn't want them to leave. But again, it's about how confident you are in yourself and how much you know your worth. It all goes to that eventually, because when you're confident, other people not so easily intimidate you.
It's very
And
true.
it takes some years, right, to get there.
It does, but right, this qualitative study is from STEM Women, International STEM Women.com. They one of the reframing recommendations was normalize setbacks. Like we all have setbacks, and um, again, men tend to muscle through it a little bit better. Just normalize that it's going to happen, and then female role models. That's another thing in tech everywhere, frankly, that's missing. Someone says, who are your female role models? I think my best female role model I knew in the last 5 years of my career, of my full-time working career. Other than that, I can't really name them, and it isn't that I think I'm so great, but people that I've worked with, female, I could probably count on one hand the women in tech who I really looked up to, and I really looked up to them. They were amazing for a lot of reasons, but I mean, hopefully nowadays there will be more female role models for women in tech or in any field of study or field of work. But I think
Certainly.
we have to work on that.
That's important. That's why we do what we do. So definitely with you
Yeah,
on that.
yeah.
Before we end our conversation, I wanted to ask you if there's anything else you would like to share that maybe I haven't touched on.
Well, I do talk about corporate survivalism, and I have examples of women who do it well and women who don't do it well. And to me, corporate survivalism means it's like when you're out in the wilderness, right? And you're stuck in a snowstorm and you know what to do to survive and thrive and make it out alive and come out a better human, right? Corporate survivalism, you do just that. You're caught in a storm, you weather through, you survive, you thrive because you learned from it, okay? Well, some women, I've seen their corporate survivalism skills are, I almost use the term sharp elbows, which I absolutely
Yeah.
detest.
Yeah.
I don't even know what it means, and I've been called it. I almost just said it, okay, which I'm mad at myself for that, but nonetheless, it's a term we use. But some women are just really good at coming in and sort of pushing everyone aside and finding their way into places where they have a great title, they get a lot of media attention, they are at the right tables. And, I never was like that, and I probably sometimes wish I would have been more assertive. But the women I saw who did that, I didn't really respect, because it's just not the way to treat people. I'm much more believer in collaboration. Other people are very inner circle kind of leaders where, they've just got their inner circle of core of people, and it's a little catty, and I've experienced that many times in leadership. And while the people who practice these things are corporate survivalists because they have a lot of boxes checked, probably make great money and all this good stuff, but they are not, I don't respect them. So corporate survivalist skills that I do respect are, you head into the storm together, right? You find strength in teamwork, and you become a generous team builder, and you make sure those below you are also rising with you and learning and growing. And you do after action reviews, and you find out, well, what did we do well? What did we not do well? What did I do well? What did I not do well? And then you're authentic about what your role may have been, in causing the storm or not fixing the storm completely. But you come out the other end a better human being, a better leader. Those people don't always get recognized in a culture that is about outcomes, sales, tech, you know. But I think at the end of the day, those are the people who are going to have that survivalist muscle and feel a lot better about themselves. Now, all the other stuff we talked about, negotiating for yourself, standing up for yourself, you have to also have that if you're going to be the collaborator, you know, the introspective, the self-aware leader, which I really believe in. You also have to have that tough side of you. But getting ahead at all costs and stepping over people to get there, that is not the way to go. And we all know that. A lot of guys are really good at that. And I really dislike that. And cultures that allow it, when the next generation starts to grow up, they're not going to tolerate that. They will not tolerate that. Trust me, I just taught a bunch of young people and they are savvy, smart, and they do not like that culture. So we need to evolve.
Definitely. And Barbara, how can people find you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm super active. Barbara.Spitzer. Please find me and connect with me. And my own company, Two Rivers Partners. It's tworiverspartners.com. Two is TWO is spelled out. And, find me there.
Definitely. And I'll put the links in the show notes. And I want to thank you, Barbara, for being here today and sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Limor. It's great to speak with you.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Barbara Spitzer. And as always, I welcome any feedback. Please review my podcast, share with whoever you think is going to help, and subscribe to be notified of new episodes. Before we wrap up, I wanted to share a preview for next week's episode. I'm going to joined by Chiquita Hall Jackson, and she's a top employment attorney known as the discrimination disruptor. And she's going to share her incredible journey of resilience, overcoming 45 rejections, and eventually starting her own practice. And she'll share tips on navigating workplace discrimination, building a support system, and making your work visible. So definitely, if you're looking for inspiration and actionable advice on advancing your career, you don't want to miss this episode. And please make sure to subscribe and tune in to next week to hear Chiquita's powerful story and insights. See you next week. Thank you.